Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Show on Saga 960. It's a real honor of mine to introduce you tonight to a gentleman that I interacted with a bunch about a decade ago, frankly, when we were involved in the Mississauga Summit and the Western GTA Summit. An individual who I found incredibly thoughtful, very knowledgeable about urban issues. And someone who really wanted to make a difference. He's the former mayor of Burlington, His Worship former Mayor Rick Goldring. Sir, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Brian. Thank you very much for having me on.
My pleasure. So you were mayor for 8 years in Burlington, and you were
2010 to 2018. Yeah,
and you were a councillor before that.
I was a councillor for 4 years before that.
Do you miss it?
At the beginning I did. It was a challenge leaving office when you lose an election. The rug is pulled out from underneath you, and it takes a while to adjust. But no, I don't miss it now, and especially during COVID. My goodness, it was funny at the beginning of COVID in March, almost 2 years ago, when it was just happening. I was saying, gee, I wish I was there. I wish I was there. And I went, because the adrenaline gets going. You've got some leadership to show. You got some challenges to address. You've got to communicate. And I enjoyed doing that sort of thing when I was mayor. But boy, I wouldn't have wanted to be back there now. It's been 22 months of real challenges, and it's really accentuated some of the other challenges that municipalities have around funding, around housing. It's challenging on all fronts these days.
How do you think municipalities in Ontario, not just Burlington, but municipalities generally have adapted, have responded to COVID situation?
Well, I think they've done very well. They've been very flexible and trying to be as thoughtful as they can on their budgeting, because their revenue's been affected, and they've tried to reduce expenses in certain ways. I think overall, I think they've done very well. I mean, you can always analyze somebody's work looking back at it and maybe find some errors, but overall, I think we should be very grateful that we have the leadership in place in all levels of government. Canada is one of the greatest countries in the world, if not the greatest country in the world, and it's so easy to take shots at elected officials, but where would you want to be? Where really would you want to be, other than living in Canada, other than living in the GTA, where we're so fortunate to live? No, I think we can look back at the work of our elected officials and be grateful.
One of the criticisms was that they, responded too quickly back in 2020, I guess it was, with closing of parkland and parks and things like that. What about that?
Yeah, I think there were some early decisions that were made that weren't as thoughtful as they could have been. But I think as the research comes out, and as you get more and more information, you're able to make better decisions. But we know now that the COVID is airborne disease, it's transmissible through the air. And when you're outside, the chance of getting COVID is very remote. So you want to encourage people to get outside and exercise and connect with other people in a careful way. So that was maybe not one of the best decisions that elected officials made in the early part of COVID.
One of the good decisions that I think they made, frankly, just right across Ontario and maybe across the world, was opening up parking for outdoor dining. In Burlington, I had the pleasure of going to a couple of great restaurant patios. What do you think about that move?
I think that was a great move. And the fact is that there's still some restaurants right now in Burlington, despite the fact it's minus 18 today, as we tape this, that they're still open and they're covered, and they have heaters, or some of them are covered, some of them have heaters. So it's good. You want to give your merchants, and certainly the hospitality sector, every opportunity to serve their customers.
What about property taxes? This is a complaint I've heard from a bunch of people. They say that, property taxes are based on the value of the property, but if the property can't be open and can't operate, the value must have gone down. And so therefore property taxes should go down. And obviously, clearly, you're getting a lot less services because you don't need those services because you're not operational.
Yeah, there's merit to that comment. I think there's a lot of merit to that, and it's interesting. I couldn't help myself. I was invited to join the Burlington Chamber of Commerce Political Action Committee, so I'm on that these days, and we talk about those sorts of issues. But certainly, if you can't use your business for business and you've got to pay property tax on it, that's a challenge, and all the other expenses you have to incur. That is a challenge, and there should be a way that there can be some mitigation or minimization of those costs.
When you think about rent as a comparable, the federal government effectively, for a long time, not forever, but for a long time, paid effectively 75% of the rent. If tenants paid a certain amount, they would, and landlords forgave a certain amount, the federal government would come in with a balance. And so therefore they accepted that people couldn't pay the rent and shouldn't pay the rent because the business wasn't operating. So if it makes sense for rent, why wouldn't it make sense for property taxes to be reduced by government?
Brian, I don't have to defend anything these days. I'm not in office. There's strong merit to that. I think that there's strong merit to looking at how you can help small businesses that still have to pay taxes on their business properties when they're not in operation because in COVID. There should be a way to minimize that. But you have to be thoughtful. I mean, it's got to be done in the right way, and it's got to be done in a fair way. And I think that's some of the challenges with some of the programs is coming up with the right lens to look through and determining who should qualify.
We're chatting tonight with Rick Goldring. He is the former mayor of Burlington. He was mayor for 8 years. He was a councillor before that. We're going to be talking about his career. We're going to be talking about the current political situation in the GTHA. And we're going to be talking about what he's doing now, which is a fascinating new business that he's launched, which is a podcast that is called Mayor of Money. And he's a financial planner, and he runs his own firm, Goldring Financial Leadership. We're going to take a break and come back more with Mayor Rick Goldring, former Mayor Mick Goldring, in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I got it off the top, Mr. Goldring, Rick Goldring, former, Your Worship, former mayor of Burlington. Tell everyone a little story. I had the distinct privilege of being asked by former Mayor Hazel McCallion to chair something called the Mississauga Summit, and we did that for a couple of years, and really tried to add to the civic conversation in the Mississauga. And then she said, a lot of these issues are wider than Mississauga. They're relative to the whole, Western GTA, and she wanted me to get Brampton and Oakville involved, and so we ended up launching. We had a press conference scheduled, and we went to Peel, the Peel Council to get funding and to announce it, and it was Brampton and Oakville, and I remember that after the council, they said one thing. They said, this is really smart, it could have a big impact, but Burlington should be involved. And I had never met you. I had, frankly, other than going to a couple of restaurants, hadn't spent a lot of time, regrettably, in Burlington. And the mayor of Oakville said, I think you should give Mayor Goldring a call, and he'd like to get involved. And I went back to my office, and I was about to phone you to ask you if you would consider joining, even though we had already announced the formation of the Mississauga, Brampton, Oakville organization. And there was a message there from you. You had called me. I guess you or someone had heard about the press conference and got upset that you weren't involved and you wanted to get involved. And I got the message, and you said that you wanted me to call you urgently. I called you. We ended up having a meeting the very next day, and you dove in with 2 huge feet and more than that, and dedicated yourself to our efforts. And I got to tell you, I have rarely been as impressed by a public official as I was by you, by your initiative, by your knowledge of urban issues, by your desire to make the GTHA, Burlington, and its neighbors better than I have by almost anyone else. And so I really want to thank you for that and congratulate you for that, and tell you that I really appreciated your support, because I couldn't have done the job that I tried to do without your help and assistance. So thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
My pleasure. What now do you think are the major issues facing the GTHA?
Well, Brian, the summit that you initiated was all about transportation, and obviously that's still a big issue, and it's bigger as the population grows in the GTHA. Transportation becomes more and more critical, more and more important, but also housing. You know, we've heard it so often that, you know, Canada's growing by 400,000 people a year in immigration, plus international students. And last year, because of COVID, was an anomaly where we didn't have that. But it's going to continue. We need immigration because of the economic situation in Canada, because of the fact that we are an aging population on our own. We need new people to come into our country. So we need housing. We need to have 100,000 new housing units a year for the next 10 years in Ontario. And where are we going to put them? And in recognizing in Burlington, you know, we've been challenged for some time in the fact that 50% of Burlington's in the green belt. We're not going to build up there. So we're left with growing within our urban boundary. And that's a challenge. You know, if there's one thing that people dislike more than urban sprawl, it's intensification. And, you know, we know about all about intensification in Burlington because we don't know how to grow any other way. And Mississauga is similar. Toronto has been like that for a long, long time. And one of the things that people don't understand is that cities are never full. You can never close the door on new people coming into a city, and cities evolve, cities grow, and you don't want them shrinking going the other way. They're either growing or they're shrinking. You do want them growing in a thoughtful way. So that continues to be transportation and housing, and urbanization continues to be, I would say, the biggest challenges locally that we have to deal with.
Okay, so how do we deal with it? One of the the biggest issues we have right now is housing affordability, because of the 400,000 plus immigrants that are going to be expected to come to Canada. Plus, there is out migration from Toronto, but in migration into the Peel region and Halton region, and because of just household formation, people that are in apartments or with their families that want to then get their own place. There's a huge demand for housing. And I think that, I'm shocked by the statistics that say that housing prices in Halton and Mississauga and Peel have gone up by over 20% in the last year, which is astronomical when the housing prices were high to start with. What's the solution if we can't build in the Greenbelt?
That is a huge challenge, and certainly, I would say that in suburban communities, traditional suburban communities, the way Mississauga was formed with Cooksville and Port Credit and Clarkson and Streetsville and Oakville and Milton and Halton Hills and Burlington. Those are traditional suburban communities. And we're transitioning to more urban, but we're hardwired for suburban. We're hardwired to drive the car everywhere we go. So we need to figure out a way to make multi-unit residential buildings family friendly and friendly for all different types of people. And we need to just accept that's the way we're going to grow in this area primarily. There's very little room left for greenfield suburban development. So we have to grow differently. So we need to be thoughtful, and we need to build compact, mixed use, walkable, transit supportive communities. And there's nothing, maybe it sounded simple the way I said it, but there's nothing simple about doing that. You need to work with the provincial government who has the metro links. You need to work with the region that you're in as a local municipality, and you need to work with the development sector because they're the ones that do the building. And you need to work with your residents, and you need to connect and recognizing you need to collaborate the best way you can, but recognizing it's not simple, it's not easy, and you have people that have very intransigent in your views. You need to educate people, you need to bring them along. But it's very, very challenging times, and recognizing that people don't like change, especially when they don't have a control over that change. So you need to bring people along.
I saw you making decisions for the whole community, not for a parochial small part of the community. I had Joe Barrage, principal of urban strategies, one of the top planners in Toronto, if not Canada, if not the world, on my show. And he said the problem was with our governance structure. He said that the fact that local councillors were elected locally and that they ended up being very influential, if not the most influential, on local zoning application approval decisions. And that NIMBYism meant that they made short-term electoral decisions to turn down increased density applications to the benefit of the local residents, because that's what they wanted, rather than what was the right thing for the future of the community and or for future residents, was the problem. And he said, the only way out of this is to change the governance system and elect people on a citywide basis so they no longer make parochial, small, almost fiefdom-like decisions. What do you think about that?
Well, I do think there's merit to that. I mean, I did see it when I was on council, how certain councils are really focused on their ward and not as much on the rest of the city. And it's typical for a development application inside a ward for the ward councillor to not support it, but you get everybody else to support it. So sometimes the games happen like that. And you're making an interesting point, and there's so much criticism of the former Ontario Municipal Board, which is now the Ontario Land Tribunal. And what you just said is reasons why we need a body like the Ontario Land Tribunal to take into consideration a big picture view as opposed to a very narrow view, which is often the case for councillors with a development in their area, as well as local councils on occasion.
I had another person on my show who said that when you have an OMB or an Ontario Land Tribunal that makes those right decisions, it allows councillors to not be adult because they can still play to that NIMBYism, knowing that the right thing that should be done will be actually done by this bigger body, this higher body later on. And that if you actually got rid of those bodies, we'd either have chaos because of no development, or councillors would finally grow up and act like adults. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, that happens. I mean, it's easy to say no to a development and blame the Ontario Land Tribunal for making the decision and say, we did everything to fight it, but it's that darn Ontario Land Tribunal that doesn't have any interest in our community that made the decision. I've seen it. I've seen it, and recently I've seen it in Burlington where, the local council says no to a development, and the decision's made at the Ontario Land Tribunal. You blame the Ontario Land Tribunal, and you're far better off to negotiate right at the very beginning when the development application comes in. Even if you don't like it, you work with the development sector, because then you've got the opportunity to shape and form it. When you abdicate decisions and you let it go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, you're abdicating the decisions, you don't have any control over it, and you're leaving it to somebody else to decide on the future of your city. But you know what? When you cooperate or negotiate, have discussions with the development industry, it's not good politics.
I was in your community recently and driving down, I think it was Brant Street. Is that sort of the main drag that goes from the QEW?
The main drag, yeah.
And I wish, in close to the lake, it's beautiful with great restaurants and development. But I was shocked at how much single story development, strip mall there was almost the whole way up to the QEW. And I was wondering why that doesn't look like, like Yonge and Eglinton or why isn't there 20, 40 story beautiful towers and tons more development? Because if you had that kind of development along that street, it wouldn't spread out over all of Burlington, but it would be on that block. And you've got a GO train station, I believe at Brant and just south of the QEW. You've got the QEW, you got Lakeshore, you've got great dynamic, downtown urban kind of entertainment at the south end. You got a great park at the south end. Why hasn't that been developed more?
Well, it will be developed more. There's a number of development applications in process. The downtown has been very controversial with regard to development. I think that's part of the reason I'm no longer mayor now, is because of the development issue. And I always said, as I said earlier, that we need to shape and form it. We need to work with the developers to come up with development that's a win-win for the community. So I guess that's why. And the new council, which is not new anymore, they've been there for 3 years, with support of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, have moved the designation of the Urban Growth Center from downtown Burlington to up around the Burlington GO station in the area that you mentioned. So there's a desire for people that live in the area and many people in the city to try to protect downtown Burlington from some of the development. Having said that, there's 7 major development applications with all buildings of most of the time over 20 stories that will go through. They're not approved yet, but they will go through because they were applied for under the previous designation when the Urban Growth Center was right in downtown Burlington. So it will happen, Brian. You're going to see a lot more density and time in downtown Burlington.
One of the issues that came up in the Western GTA Summit was a need to work more closely together. And Anne Goldring, back in I think 1996, chaired a task force called the GTA Task Force, and she recommended that her assessment was that really what we needed to do was have a GTA council comparable to the old Metro Council, and she had recommended that Toronto be amalgamated, which actually was listened to and occurred. But she also recommended that Peel, Brampton, and Mississauga be amalgamated, Halton, Oakville, and Burlington, and Milton be amalgamated, that York, Vaughan, and Markham, and other areas be amalgamated, and the Durham, Ajax, Pickering, Oshawa be amalgamated, and you end up having sort of 5 cities in the GTA, and that you have those 5 mayors form a new GTA council. And that she said the problem was that when you had a mayor of Toronto that represented, call it almost 3 million people, sit down with 29 other or something like that mayors. The premier and the mayor were the only people that really got heard, and those other 29 mayors of smaller places weren't heard. But if you had 5 strong mayors of 5 strong cities, then you'd have a really good governance system. What do you think of that?
Well, there may be merit in that, but the challenge is when Mississauga became a city, and then Streetsville disappeared, and Clarkson, and I mean they're still there, but they're not on their own. People like to identify with their local communities. What I would do, Brian, if I was in charge, is I would take the planning away from the local municipalities and give it to the region. Because right now there's a regional official plan, there is a local official plan, and there's processes involved to review both and to come up with new direction for both. And the idea of the local councils making the decisions on development and caving into NIMBYism, you could mitigate that by having planning at the regional level. So that would be a little bit of a step to going to what you suggested there or what you mentioned, but it wouldn't be going all the way.
Is your gravitational pull more to Toronto or more to Hamilton?
It depends. I would say in Burlington, traditionally it's been more Hamilton. A third of the workforce in Burlington is from Hamilton. A lot of people come from Hamilton to work in Burlington. There's more people that go to Toronto to work, or used to pre-pandemic, that live in Burlington than go to Hamilton. But there's the Hamilton, Burlington, Brantford YMCA. There's the Hamilton, Burlington, Halton, United Way. There are a number of different organizations that are Hamilton, Burlington. So traditionally we've leaned more to Hamilton. I would say realistically now it's probably split. We lean to Hamilton for some things, lean to Toronto for others.
We're chatting tonight with the former mayor of Burlington. He was mayor for 8 years, councillor before that, Rick Goldring. We're going to take a break for some messages. We're going to come back and we're going to then focus on what he's currently doing, which he has a podcast called The Mayor of Money. And if he helps us manage money the way he helped us manage our greater GTHA, he's someone that we should be listening to. Let's take a break, stay with us, and we'll come back with The Mayor of Money. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with Rick Goldring. He is the former mayor of Burlington. He was mayor for 8 years. He was a councillor before that. Someone that I got to know through some civic advocacy work that I was involved with, and I was really very impressed with Mr. Goldring. He's now a financial planner with his own firm, Goldring Financial Leadership, and he's got a podcast that I've checked out, which I've really enjoyed, called The Mayor of Money. And he's got a couple of things that I think are really quite helpful for us to listen to, that I thought it would make sense for Rick to take us through. And so, Rick, tell us a little bit about your business, if you could, and what are some of the things that you think we should be paying attention to from a financial planning standpoint?
Well, thanks for that opportunity, Brian. So just some background. Prior to serving as a councillor and a mayor, I had a long career in the financial services sector, working with a number of different types of people, but a lot of business owners, and helping them deal with estate and estate planning, financial planning, wealth and risk management. And when I decided to go back into business in 2019, I decided to make that my focus. And so I do that work with business owners, and I like to set the scene about where we are when I'm dealing with different people. And one is the fact that we can't get away from it. Income taxes are going to be going up in a big way in the future, or some form of taxation has to increase. We have an aging baby boom that's going to make up 23% of the population, or people over 65 will be 23% of the population by 2030. And right now it's only about 16%. That number is going to increase, and the government can't take care of us. And it's one thing that people don't really think about too often. People are living longer than they've ever lived before. Life expectancies are increasing by 2 to 2.5 years a decade. There's significant pressures for tax rate increases. There was a big piece in the Globe and Mail recently about the fact that governments are not paying attention to the fact that we're going to have so many people living longer, 23% of the population over 65 by 2030, and governments aren't addressing the impact that's going to have on medical care, home care, long-term care, et cetera.
I was surprised. I was surprised by an article that I read that was suggesting you've got to really wait to start taking down your CPP until 70, because you can get a little bit more money. And the issue is not if you can cash out all of the money you put in. The issue is if you can keep having the money coming in as long as you live. And it was strongly suggesting don't start drawing down your CPP when you're 60 or 65, wait to 70. What do you think of that?
I think it depends on the situation. I understand the reason for that suggestion, but it depends on the circumstances. And that's where you need planning. You shouldn't make these ad hoc decisions. Your situation could be very different than somebody else's situation. So that's why it's very important that people do some planning around these decisions. But aging population is a big issue, and we're living longer. And that's why the article is suggesting that people defer taking their CPP until 70, because they're going to get more and hopefully they'll live longer. And that'll protect them from some of the extra costs of long-term care down the road. But climate change is a big issue, as well as COVID. So I think we know that taxes are going to go up, and of course, real estate values have continued to soar in Southern Ontario in a big way. So that's the position. And I do a lot of work with business owners. I enjoy working with business owners. They're all different, but I really admire business owners. Small and medium-sized business are the sort of the lifeblood of our communities. They contribute so much to charity. They contribute so much sponsoring sports teams. They do so much. But they're so focused on their business, and they're so focused on others, they have little time to look after themselves and look at those big picture issues around retirement and their estate planning. And that's where I come in. So some of the big picture things you have to deal with, wills, powers of attorney, insurance, health benefits, aging parents, charitable planning, giving, and so on. The challenge is that there's not enough time to do all this planning. And what happens for a lot of business owners, successful business owners, and wealthy families is they grow their assets in a significant way. They grow their assets in a significant way, and they're just going to pass on all their assets to their or not all their assets. They're going to use some of them while they're alive, but they're going to pass on a lot. And people don't realize the tax implications that we have when we pass on. There's significant tax implications that I help people look at. And you look at your registered assets upon the second one to die, second spouse to die, up to 53% of your RSP or RIF or pensions goes to tax. You look up, 27% of capital gains and increases in the value of a business can disappear to tax, and taxes on corporate holdings and passive income, et cetera. And
I got to interrupt you. I had an interesting conversation with someone that told me that if you die married versus die unmarried, there's a 30% difference in the tax. And so therefore, really what you should do is get married before you die, so you can pass on your assets far more tax efficiently to someone else. There's a 30% difference. Is that anywhere near true?
Well, there's a significant difference because, upon your passing and you're married, all your assets can pass on to the surviving spouse without tax implications. So you pass on a RIF, there's no tax implications. You die and you're single, all the money in the RIF, you got $1 million in a RIF, 53% of it's going to go to tax. Whereas if you are married, it can go to your surviving spouse without tax implications. But upon the passing of your spouse, that's where the tax implications come in. So I guess if you could plan this chain of events where people kept on getting remarried, you could defer taxes for a long time. I don't think that's
this person was joking, saying if you're single close to death, you should find someone to marry just to save 30% of your taxes.
Yeah, but then if you wanted to pass it on to your family, then it wouldn't matter.
Oh, okay. Well, you could leave 70% to your family, 30% to the tax saving to someone else. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, no, if you could orchestrate that, but so there is a tax grind. There's a tax grind, and when you invest money, it doesn't matter what it is, inside a corporation or outside a corporation, whether it's interest, dividends, or capital gains, you do have to pay tax. And in Canada, there's really only 4 true remaining tax shelters left. And that is your principal residence. You buy a house for $1 million, you sell it for $2 million, it's tax-free savings accounts, but you're particularly limited in how much money you can put in. In Canada, if your 649 numbers come in, your lottery winnings are tax-free. And the other structure that I do a lot of work with is tax-exempt life insurance. Money goes into a tax-exempt life insurance policy, and it is paid out completely tax-free.
Tell us about how this works.
Well, how it works is this: that the insurance contract, everybody knows what life insurance does, or what life insurance is, but they don't know what it does. And life insurance can be a tool that you set aside money inside the policy while you're alive, and that you can access while you're alive, and you can access it in a very tax effective manner while you're alive, but it does grow inside the policy completely tax-free. So you look at tax-free savings accounts, and the fact that you can put away so much and it grows tax-free and it's paid out tax-free, but you're limited and you can't use it for a corporation. Well, with a corporation, you can use corporate-owned life insurance to grow money inside your corporation tax-free, and that money can be, upon your passing, can be paid out to your estate and to your heirs and beneficiaries without tax implications because of the tax treatment of life insurance.
So you're saying that people should be investing in life insurance, tax-exempt life insurance, as a way of saving tax and growing assets over time?
It depends on what the objectives are. But if you have people that are in their 60s and the 70s and they don't need all the money that they build up, they can take money and set it aside into an insurance policy and magnify the amount of money that will go to their family anyways. But if you're a corporation and you got money inside a corporation and you've got to pay tax on that, life insurance is a very good tool to set money aside, have it grow inside the corporation, inside the life insurance policy, and where it can be paid out upon the passing of the business owner, completely tax-free. It can go into the corporation, and through a notional account called the capital dividend account, can be paid out completely tax-free to the heirs in the estate.
Rick, I don't understand. Can you explain how this insurance works within a corporation?
So say I have a business owner and whose shares of the company are also owned by his spouse. The company can take out a life insurance policy called a joint life and last to die life insurance policy that pays out when the second one passes on, because that's when the money is needed for the estate. And they can set aside $100,000 a year for 10 years. And if they did that inside the corporation and they left it in a deposit earning 5%, and you can get 5%, they would grow the money to a certain point where at age 90, if the last one passed on at age 90, there'd be $1.8 million left. Whereas if they did the same thing with a life insurance policy, that $100,000 a year for 10 years would provide an initial benefit of insurance of $1.9 million at the very beginning, and would grow to $5.3 million at age 90. So it's a $3 million increase, or $3.5 million increase in value based on how the insurance works. So in order to get that sort of return outside the insurance policy, because of tax, you'd have to get about 12%. And that's just an example. I hope I explained it well of how insurance can work. And
so the difference here is that the life insurance is tax exempt versus on the regular investment, you're paying full tax.
Exactly. And you can borrow on the insurance while you're alive and invest in other things if you wanted to.
Fantastic. Sounds like we should all, if we've got the cash, be investing in tax exempt life insurance.
I would agree.
If people want to access your intelligence and your services in this financial planning, how do they do that?
rickgoldring.com is my website, and my email is rick@rickgoldring.com.
The Mayor of Money, Rick Goldring. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute with the Mayor of Money, Rick Goldring, the former mayor of Burlington, former councillor, and a brilliant guy, and someone who I have a lot of respect for. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Rick Goldring. Rick is a very impressive gentleman. He was mayor of Burlington for 8 years. He was a councillor before that. Before that, he was a financial planner. He's a financial planner again. He's now operating a podcast, The Mayor of Money. He runs his own financial planning firm. He's just walked us through a bunch of things that we need to think about from a financial planning standpoint, and talked about how taxes are one of those inevitable things that we end up having to pay, and that one of the things that we got to be thinking about is how to plan our financial future to reduce those taxes if at all possible. And tax exempt life insurance was one of his suggestions. And thank you for that, Rick. That was a very helpful description. Maybe though I could elevate you, because I have found that some of the best advice I've ever gotten is from former politicians, because they really know what's possible. They know, what can be done, and they know what's got to be done. I've had great conversations at times with former mayor of Mississauga, Hazel McCallion, who's talked about what really needs to be done versus what's practical. I wonder if you were not mayor, but maybe, regional chair of Halton or premier of Ontario. What would your vision be for the next 5-10 years for the Greater Toronto Hamilton area?
Wow, there's a provincial election coming up in June as well. Well, one of the things I'd like to say is this, though, and prefacing my remarks, is that, this has been a very tough time with COVID, and there's divisions about how well government has dealt with it or not dealt with it. And, anti-vaccine and pro-vaccine and so on. There's a lot of challenges that we're having in different views. Make no mistake that Canada is the solution to so many problems in the world. We are so fortunate to live where we do, despite the fact we've been through some challenges. But with regard to where we're going, the whole world is becoming more urban. And it's about time we embrace it. We embrace public transportation. We embrace density. We embrace walkability. We embrace the community connections that can be made in more urban situations. And that's the message I would say for us, that we have to accept the fact that we're going to be living closer to each other. And we want to do that in order to preserve the green space around our major municipalities. We have a great country. We have a great province. We live in a great part of Ontario. Let's look at the great things we have. Let's be grateful and build on gratitude, and not build on lack, but build on gratitude. We have a great community in Burlington, as you do in Mississauga, Brian. We're fortunate where we live, but let's continue to evolve as cities, and let's continue to evolve and be more densely populated in a thoughtful way and bring people together.
I agree with that. I had a really interesting planner, Ken Greenberg, on my show, and he said the problem with our zoning right now is that we either allow condos that are 100 units per acre or greater to be built, or suburbia, which is like 6 units per acre or less to be built. But what people really like is the beaches or Port Credit or Bloor West Village, which is like 20 to 40 units per acre. And he called it the missing middle. And he said that really what we need to do is we need to, and you may have seen it recently in Vancouver, where people can build laneway housing or backyard housing with almost no approvals necessary. He said, we've got to make it easier for people to build the denser, more urban environments that people love living in, but that aren't necessarily big, huge condos, but are townhouses or row houses or basement apartments or mother-in-law suites, things like that. What do you think of that?
We need to densify our suburban areas, and it's one of the areas that's going to be the most contentious going forward. I can anticipate the bruises that I would have if I brought it forward, but we need to look at our traditional single-family neighborhoods because we don't have anywhere else to grow. And you're right, it shouldn't just be all tall buildings and single-family homes. There should be a blend. There should be that middle that's filled in. But in order to do that, again, you need to bring people along. There's no reason why in single-family home neighborhoods you can have some duplexes, some triplexes, and fourplexes. Want to make sure they're designed well, make sure they look right, make sure they function properly, as well as some small condominium type of developments of 4 to 5 stories possibly, as well as some townhouse developments. You need to bring that along, but people are so attached to their single family home neighborhoods. It is a challenge to educate people on that and bring people on with it. And that's why it makes sense to broaden the base of elected officials so that it's a broader group that's making decisions for a particular community.
Rick Goldring, former mayor of Burlington. I want to come campaign for you. You going to run again ever?
A few people have been asking me that recently. I love my wife very much, and she would divorce me if I ever ran for elected office again. And so, no, I don't see running again. Would I rule it out completely? I don't think a former elected official could ever rule it out completely. But no, I don't anticipate.
Well, if you do, count on me. I may not be able to vote for you, but I'll certainly knock on doors and give you some money. I think you're a very, very impressive public official, and I hope and I know Canada is going to benefit from your judgment and expertise again. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks, Brian. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. on Saga 960. Good night, everybody.